All right, everybody. Hail and welcome back to another episode of Midgard Musings. My name is Jesse, and as always, I am your host. Thank you again for tuning in, watching, listening, viewing, whatever this episode is coming to you on, whether it be the YouTube channel, through Facebook, on Twitter, the podcast that I have, whichever it is. Thank you so much for supporting what I do here in any sort of way. I do have a Linktree link that is posted pretty much everywhere I post my content. So if you're looking to support this channel monetarily, you can donate through PayPal. You can become a Patreon supporter through Patreon. You can buy merchandise through Teespring. But sharing the videos, sharing the content, commenting, engaging with the content, that is actually probably one of the best ways that you can support what I do here, and it gets the word out and shares everything around. So it costs you absolutely nothing to do that. So appreciate it if you wouldn't mind taking care of that for me at your convenience. So today's video, or today's subject, is going to be on kind of riding off of the coattails of last week's video, which was on the subject of codifying heathenry. Having these specific buzzwords that exist to kind of try to make a globalized approach to the moral construct of heathenry, and kind of where I saw the flaws of that. So today's video is going to touch a little bit more on kind of where I see things as from a strongly historical side. The more and more I get into heathenry myself, the more I see the value in learning about the history of things and knowing where things came from. And it helps me build my heathenry now. It's helped me grow as a heathen much better. So what I share, again, I'm not a strictly hardcore reconstructionist heathen or a hardcore just 100% historical heathen. I do include some modern day things into my own practices, and it just works. So whatever works for you and your collective of heathens, whether it be your tribe, your kindreds, your thades, whatever it may be, however you heathen is, whatever works for you, just take that in mind. What I'm coming from here, or where I'm coming from here, it's kind of a mix of the old and the new. I like to say it's, we're practicing old ways in modern times, so there has to be some ebb and flow, there has to be some give and take. But the subject of today's topic, the topic of today's video, subject of today's discussion, whatever, was going to be on the concept or the idea of sin, and where sin falls into heathen practices nowadays. Now, I know a lot of folks might be listening to this or watching this on whatever platform you're viewing this on, and going, what are you talking about? What does sin even have to do with being heathen, right? We don't have that concept. We don't have that idea in our worldview. It's not something that we think about. How does this concept, this word sin, where does it even fit into a heathen's ideals? And I understand why that is, because it really wasn't up until, I would say, the last year or two where I got to learn more and understood more about what an arch-heathen worldview may have been like. And it goes back to understanding the words of where these words in our language, in our English language, in our modern English language, where these words originate from, and what they meant to the heathens at the time, to the people who were who existed and practiced their religious practices pre-Christian times. So, it was probably and has been a pretty fashionable thing, I would say, to say or to assume that heathens have no concept of sin. And though on the surface that may appear to be true, the caveat here is that it wasn't anything like the Christian concept or idea of sin. So when Christians, and this is, I can speak to this because I grew up in a Christian household, and a lot of folks that are, that listen or watch my content come to heathenry and come to performing their pagan practices from a background of Christianity. When Christians speak of sin, they're generally meaning one of two things, right? It's usually that either A, someone has broken divine law, right? One of the 10 commandments that in the Christian lore, when Moses went to the top of the mount and received these commandments from God and brought them down to the Israelites, that divine law became the law of the people. So that breaking of divine law, a violation of one of the 10 commandments, would make you a sinner. You would be found to be in sin. The second concept, or the second condition of making or having some sort of estrangement from their deity, was this concept of original sin, that you are all born in sin, and that the original man and woman, Adam and Eve, you are born in sin, and the only way to become cleansed of that sin is, there's this whole idea of accepting Jesus Christ as a savior and so on and so forth, and allowing him to take those sins on him, and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, that is not what we're talking about from a heathen context of sin, right? In the first case, where we're talking about breaking of divine law, breaking of the law as given to the people from a sacred power, in arch-heathen times, any violation of law, right, was viewed as violation of divine law, right, or as something that came from the sacred, because they didn't have there was no difference really between what the God's laws were and what man's laws were, because they both belonged within the Innengard of society, within the inner yard, within the inner circle. So they wouldn't have distinguished necessarily between any religious sin and secular crime, okay? In the second case, where you have this Christian sense of original sin, in arch-heathen times, it appears that really only the most severe crimes, those that warranted outlawry, those to be cast out of society, to be put out of the inner, right? So to be cast Utengard, or even further out, to be outlawed, would result in the estrangement from the gods, right? If you did something so nefarious and so severe that it caused you to be cast out of the protection of the inner yards of society, which is where they also, would think that the gods had a place to exist in society. When you were outside of that, when you were outlawed of that, you are now outside of the, I don't want to say necessarily the grace of the gods, but you're no longer a part of that. And so to say that heathens at any point in time, even before Christian times, had no concept, or had no such concept as Christian sin concepts, would be somewhat accurate, right? They had some concept of it, but it was looked at differently. It doesn't mean that the elder heathens had no concept of sin at all, or that arch-heathen society had no concept of it. But what we want to look at now is, does it have a place in heathenry now and today? Does this concept, does this idea fall into anything that we can understand of and think of today? And I say it does, and I think it does. But again, so for a lot of the newer heathens that come into this practice or this religion, that kind of get inundated with, read your books, read. It's a religion of homework. You got to read all these books. They may have been overwhelmed a bit by certain books, especially those that get penned by authors that have no real interest in preserving history and preserving the historical meanings of things. So due in no small part to a disturbing trend focus on solitary practice, especially nowadays. A lot of folks get into this and they don't have, they're not practicing heathenry in a group, collective, at the tribal level. There are, I see almost daily, cases of people who are not a part of a tribe, not a part of a group, a kindred or anything like that, but that are looking, and that they are currently a solitary practitioner. So when you get so many books written about, well, this is how you can practice heathenry, or this is how you can be a heathen, solitarily, that those things get kind of lost in this like new agey type mysticism, neo-pagan stuff, which doesn't really touch on or grasp at the roots of where heathenry is, which again, or in my opinion, falls at the tribal level. So there are people that nowadays would, perhaps be dismayed to learn that while heathen approach to sin differs, the fundamental aspects of it remain the same, right? Because again, with the arch-heathens at the time, who understood law as being both sacred and profane, that the laws of the gods and the laws of the men, there was no difference. To sin would be to transgress against divine law, and to go against those laws, to go against those orders, and to go against those customs, as it were, can hurt the health of a tribe. Compliance with these laws were vital to the foundation and sustaining a healthy and long-lived tribe, right? It's only when a tribe begins to fully grasp those sacred elements that are present in the roots of their Innengard, in that the Innengard of society, the close inner circles that exist. Only really until they get to understand where that is and what that means, that is really truly when we actually can develop a beneficial relationship with the sacred, with the gods. At least so far as we know from a historical context, right? Because what everybody did individually, what everybody did in their own hearths, in their own homes, their individual practices, things that got done, at the hearth level amongst families, there's no real documentation of how that may have looked, or what that was like, and how that was fleshed out. All that we have and all that we know of is that society, tribe was very, very important. Without a strong tribe, without a tribe that was rooted in, that had law established, and those lines and those barriers were defined, it didn't last, and it couldn't last. So the structure and order of a tribe will resonate deeply with divine implications, right? Because as those fences are built, and as the chaos of the wild is put to where it needs to be, as we define those barriers between the inner and the outer, the tribe then is allowed to move in harmony and in closeness with one another. So the construction of the Innengard, that inner yard, those inner barriers, those inner sanctums, as it is a sort of how it's like a simulation almost of the methods in which the sacred separates itself from the profane, right? Because how the sacred operates within their own constructs, sacred time, sacred space, all that kind of stuff, it's outside of there that we exist. So those barriers exist on that level. So it's a recreation, as it were. It's like a simulation of that. So in so doing this, we as the tribes, in modern times and in the profane space, we are modeling ourselves after the sacred, after the divine. Within the Innengard, within the fence, order exists. Without is where chaos reigns. And we see that time and time again in various sagas, right? When things are happening inside, there's order, and when it happens outside, there's chaos, there's all kinds of things that can happen. So the development of the tribe, the development of the order of the tribe, from within is where law exists, and from the violation of that law is where sin plays a factor. So in my mind, right, as I think about this, and as it has helped me develop as a heathen, some of the big differences with sin, coming from a Christian context versus a heathen context, is like, you know what? There's not so much that there's the non-existence of sin within a heathen worldview or within a heathen approach to things. It's, again, the fundamentals are there. But like, for instance, when we sin, right, we're not sinning against the gods directly. It's like, not from a Christian view that when you sin against God, and then you then will receive punishment from God. The way I see it is that sin is non-compliance of sacred law. It's non-compliance of the laws set in by your kinsmen, by your kith, by your kin, by your tribe, and therefore, when sin is committed, it hurts the integrity and it hurts the growth of the tribe. You do things that are going to put the tribe at risk, and do things that are therefore considered evil, because it doesn't help the tribe grow. Now, one other thing and one other idea where we see that sin exists is when things aren't done, when there is no action taken. The concept of sin as inaction. It's better to do something than to not do anything at all, right? We see some examples of that in some of the sagas as well, and in various other pieces of literature, where it's best to do something, and then take the fall or suffer the repercussions or suffer the consequences. It's better to do something than to do absolutely nothing at all. And that's where another thing that separates the heathen concept of sin, with the context of sin within a heathen view, as it would be from like a Christian view, because a Christian view of sin is that something was done. You did something to violate the law, and but there's more to it than that. There are things that there are outlying circumstances from a heathen perspective, that if you don't do anything, if you just sit there and stagnate, and don't take any action, how good are you actually being? You're not taking any sort of risk, you're not taking any sort of action, and if you just sit there and not allow any action to be taken, how good is that for the tribe? And not only do we see this in sagas and other things, but it's written throughout. If we get to the linguistics of things, the etymology of words, there are several words in Germanic languages, several other words, which could also mean that a wrong action or inaction kind of are the same things as the words for sin and crime. In so many, there are so many words of this type that it's pretty clear to take away from this that the Germanic peoples viewed action, doing things, generally as something that was good, and that inaction or not doing anything as generally evil, right? The reasons for this and believing this probably went beyond the fact that the multiverse, that their relationship with the sacred kind of depends on the interaction of, we're talking about things in some metaphysical senses now, but the well of Urd and the tree, those things kind of depend on our interactions to survive. So if we look at it, right, as inaction on the parts of individuals could affect the ultimate survival of a community. If you didn't do something, if there was somebody who failed to, perform their fair share of, harvesting things, or if there was somebody who, due to their cowardice, didn't join a battle beside his fellows, that could cost lives. Those types of things, those types of inaction could drastically change how a tribe would thrive and survive, right? So these are crimes in which an individual had not so much committed a wrong, or did something wrong as so much as he just failed to do what was right. The inaction, the decision to not make a stand, the decision to not do something. So he failed to act. And because of that, inaction, generally speaking, as I mentioned before, was viewed as something not beneficial to the community, therefore doesn't do anything to maintain the community. Inaction, therefore, would be considered as something not good or evil, and could fall into the same category as what would be considered sin. So it appears that we can take away from this, at least, that from an older heathen view, sin is not just simply a transgression of the law, right? It's not just that we meet some sort of, we do something that puts us in a state of estrangement from the gods or our community due to violating the laws. It's a state in which we have failed to act, or failed to grow, or failed to, contribute our fair share, fair to do anything. And as such, we have committed sin. We have therefore sinned as a result. So I hope this has given you guys some things to think about in terms of the context behind sin and the heathen context specifically. For more about this, I definitely encourage you guys to please go out and purchase your own copy of We Are Our Deeds by Eric Woden. I've mentioned this in the last video. I've mentioned it in other videos as well, where these sort of things get talked about and give you a more, hopefully, well-rounded understanding, because it's all about the morals and ethics of pre-Christian times in Scandinavia and in these Germanic countries. So I hope, like I said, I hope that this has shed some light and answered any questions that you may have. Don't forget, if you do have questions or you want to add your own insights, head down into either the comments section or anywhere that you're watching this or listening to this. If there's an area for you to leave your feedback, please don't hesitate to do so. I love getting those type of things. I do try to respond or comment back to everything that I get, wherever it may be. So most popularly, it's on the YouTube channel. So head down into the description. Make sure that you have, if you do like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this go around between myself and other heathen related channels, share it around, comment, interact with videos. It helps with the YouTube algorithm and getting these things kicked out. So like, comment, share, subscribe. You guys and gals know the bit. Appreciate all your support. And I appreciate you listening today. As it stands right now, I am sitting in a hotel room recording this in North Carolina. My wife and I are out here visiting some family. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you again for your time. Hail, and I'll see you guys all in the next one.